No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this my way. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of Iron. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of Iron.
What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and I believe we can say definitively that EG is currently getting slapped at MSI. Now, before MSI, I was saying that EG is better than G2. There were a lot of people out there who were saying that G2 is better than EG. And the results so far would suggest that G2 is better than EG. But let's talk through the different points again about G2 versus EG. And first of all, I think it comes down to talent. So when it comes to talent, and this is something that we're not going to agree on this because of 4 games at MSI. And some of you might not like that answer, but I still think that Broken Blade and Impact are very close. I still think that Inspired is better than Yonkos. Caps is better than JoJo, and that's one of the main concerns that I had going into this tournament. In my first look video for G2 versus EG, we said specifically that if Caps is much better than JoJo, they could play around that and try to exploit that. And then in the bot lane, Flocket and Targamas against Danny and Vulcan. I still think that Danny and Vulcan are the better bot lane long term, but again, we mentioned this could be a meta that is better for Flocket and Targamas. Now, I think that it's important to mention that we don't necessarily know what this meta is going to settle into. Right now, we're in an uncertain meta that hasn't been fully defined because there are new champions that are strong. Not all of the resulting counter picks are well known and stuff like that. So from a talent perspective, my opinions have not changed about which players are better than the other players. Could they change eventually? Yes. Are 4 games at MSI going to change my evaluations of Danny or anyone else? No. The answer is no. And then before we get into everything else, the other prevailing narrative before MSI was talking about experience. It's going to be beneficial for G2, for EG to get experience on the international level, have JoJo, Pion, and Danny playing against international competition. Everyone else had basically played in international competitions before, I believe. So the one reason I wanted to bring that up is because if coaching allowed that narrative to impact evil geniuses and kind of turn down the intensity of practices and stuff like that, that's a problem. I don't know if that's what happened, but we're going to be talking about coaching a lot in this video because I think that it's definitely been proven that Dylan Falco is better than the coaching. Dylan Falco and his coaching staff are better than EG's coaching staff. I don't know if I said that explicitly before going into MSI, but I think if you asked me that, I think I would have said yes. Dylan Falco and G2 are the better coaching staff overall. The reason why I would say that is because I've been a huge fan of Dylan Falco since his days when he was in North America, going over and being a part of Fnatic. And you might not believe me on this, but he actually reached out to me at one point to talk about doing item analysis for Fnatic, or I got trolled. But I'm 99% sure it was him because he contacted me through YouTube and Facebook, and I have screenshots. I'm not going to share the screenshots, don't really care, but I have a lot of respect for him. I think that he understands the game very well. So why does coaching matter so much in this situation? In international tournaments, especially when there's a new patch, that's when coaching really shines. The ability to take the information that your players are giving you from solo queue and scrims and then applying that to the different drafts is going to be a huge thing for your team. One thing that Alex and I talked about in one of our previous videos was, how do teams change from patch to patch, meta to meta? At the beginning of a season, should we be using statistics or should we be using should we be using simulation or the other system? I forget what he called it. And and we kind of agreed that when you're shifting between metas and there's less known about, how the games will play out, it's better to use the less sophisticated systems. And I think that's probably one of the biggest limitations of Evil Geniuses right now, is that they are much better once the meta is understood. So before I get into the themes of why I think EG is struggling, I just want to talk through the games really fast. And I think a lot of the problems have come down to drafting. And I know that that's obviously a huge scapegoat in general. People love to talk about how drafting is bad. But there are specific reasons why drafts can be bad. Will a draft always decide the game? No. But can it have a big impact on the decision making and the ability for the players to play the game in a competitive way? And the answer, I think, is definitely yes. So if you're EG and you're blue side in game 1 at MSI against G2, I think that it would be kind of naive to think that there wouldn't be some sort of counterpick to Ryze. I don't have an issue with them picking Ryze first overall. But blinding Samira Nautilus seems bad to me. And then they were eventually countered with Ryze, right? Or the Ryze was countered by Anivia. And again, you can't anticipate Caps bringing out Anivia, but that's the kind of thing that's possible in an uncertain meta where, if G2 was just lazily drafting, I think teams can kind of fall into, then yes, G2 is always going to have the option of counter-picking you. The second part about the draft being bad is that they picked Karthus into Graves. Karthus has a losing matchup into Graves. The reason why it's so bad is because Graves will always have the tempo advantage, and yes, Karthus will scale harder and could theoretically be a late-game carry that takes over the entire game, but I'm pretty sure if you asked most junglers what's the better side of that matchup in professional play where tempo and the early game is so important, I think that most people would just agree that Graves is the better option than Karthus. It's the easier side to play as well. And ease of execution is a huge thing in League of Legends and in every sport and esport out there. Are there other strategies that are effective when they're executed perfectly? Yes. Should you always be asking your players to execute perfectly if you can avoid it? No. So then in game 1, Jojo died mid. He still had a pretty good game. They lost a Rift fight. They lost Dragon Control. They fell behind very hard, and they lost. There's not a ton that I can really talk about from that first game. It was relatively slow. G2 being decisive and making that Baron call. Great job by G2. I'm not trying to take anything away from G2 in that game. I think G2 drafted better. I think they played the early game better, and they made the best call of the game, which was the Baron. They deserved to win game 1. I think that the drafting is something that the draft differential is something that could have been mitigated by the coaching staff, but it wasn't. So I think that the coaches have a lot of blame for game 1. I don't think they should be flamed for game 1, but they do deserve some of the blame. And again, how much are the players deciding what's picked versus the coaches? Unclear. Game 2. Game 2. J4 versus Graves. Graves, again, is going to power farm and will always have more pressure than J4 because of the outscaling potential. If you're Evil Geniuses and you're getting off ganks in the early game, then fine, you could have a chance to win, but the pressure is on you all game to make those effective early game plays, and it's similar to the Renekton debate where Renekton forces your team to play the game faster, try to build up a large gold lead. They failed at doing that. They lost in lane. Pretty hard. Danny had a horrible game. And you need to ask yourself, when the other team first picks Graves and you pick Jarvan, right? You're saying, we are going to try to gank lanes while the Graves farms. Then you pick Ezreal. Ezreal is not going to be able to punish the other team hard enough, especially when it's blind, because G2 is going to know, okay, we have the Graves side of the matchup. They need to kind of punish us by ganking a lot. If they don't gank a lot successfully, we basically win the game because Jarvan's going to fall off a cliff unless he gets everybody very far ahead. So that's that. G2 threw at Baron. So this is a game where G2 had Evil Geniuses had no business being in this game, but G2 makes a risky call, which I'm fine with. Throws Baron. Evil Geniuses gets Baron, and then around like the 35 minute mark, after taking multiple inhibitors, getting a second round of Baron, I think they probably took a dragon as well. They're forcing into they're trying to force the end of the game before the dragon fight happens, because they think, okay, if Vulcan gets a really good engage off of, we could theoretically win this fight and just end the game outright. The better play in that scenario, like I respect the decision to try to end the game. The better decision in that scenario is to pressure the inhibitors, get the minions flooding the base, take the inhibitors if you can or whatever, force G2 to either engage in a bad situation or back off onto the dragon. That's really how you should be playing that. They go for the aggressive play. Again, I respect the aggression. I don't really care, especially in a group where you're like 99%, not 99, you're easily over 75% to get out of the group if you're Evil Geniuses, because you're better than Order, and G2 is better than Order, so all you really had to do was beat Order consistently and you were going to get out. So that's game 2. That was basically, G2 deserved to win that game again as well. Why do they deserve to win? They selected better in draft. They played the early game better. And then even after they threw away the Baron, they looked for their opportunity to get back into the game. EG threw the game back to them, and G2 won. So good job, G2, for winning game 2. Both teams didn't play to their best level, but, ultimately G2 played better. Game 3, another questionable draft. So anybody who watches my videos knows that I'm not a fan of Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate is a one-dimensional champion. Yes, he can help other champions get ahead, but it's putting a large restriction on your team comp throughout the game, in my opinion. So G2 locks in Diana Yasuo. I would rather have the Diana Yasuo side of that matchup all the time. And if you think about it from like what happened throughout the season, teams like Vitality were playing Diana Yasuo. So like G2, if you thought to yourself like Rogue or Fnatic was playing the TF side, G2 was playing Vitality was playing the Diana Yasuo side, there is a good chance that people would criticize the draft from Vitality for being over aggressive and not needing to play that way, and there are other better selections. But at this point, G2 basically was guaranteed, I think, to get through, assuming they beat Order. So, I would kind of respect them trying to limit test a little bit. That was the biggest portion. That was the biggest thing that happened in the draft phase. So I think that having the very high priority on Twisted Fate isn't something that I love. And again, that comes back to coaching, drafting, and JoJo's champion pool, which we know that JoJo's champion pool is relatively small because he's a younger. Not because he's a younger player, but he hasn't expanded his pool yet. And kind of the cop-out reason is because he's a younger player. But the coaches need to be pressing him to have better champion flexibility, and they need to have better drafting. So a lot of you out there are probably fine with the TF for Diana Yasuo. Personally, I'm not. So at the 15-minute mark, after taking the first dragon, EG gave away dragon for Rift. So they gave away the second dragon of the game. Why would they do something like this? One of the reasons is because they were trading it for Rift. But the other reason that you could easily make the argument for is that if you're Evil Geniuses and you think that you might be able to outscale G2, which is a completely separate question, then by taking that first dragon, you extend the amount of time. By not allowing G2 to take 4 dragons consecutively, you expand the time that you have to build up a gold lead before Dragon Soul by 5 or 6 minutes, based on, how soon does a team take dragon after it spawns. So if that's your reason, then fine. But the third dragon starts, and instead of giving away that one or trying to trade that for a different objective on the map, EG dies at the third dragon, and that turns into a Baron. That could easily have been the end of the game, but EG was able to continue fighting in that game. They traded Baron. They ended up getting a Baron later in the game, but they traded Baron for a Dragon Soul, and this was after a fight that they won. So after you win that fight, it's Senna Yasuo against your entire team. You're better off chasing them to the dragon, taking away Dragon Soul, giving yourself another 6-minute opportunity. Obviously, you can win team fights or get into a spot where you might be able to get a pick or something, and like just keep the game very close, keep the game competitive. But they opted to take the Baron instead of, defending the Dragon Soul. Dragon Soul is worth thousands of gold, right? So it's probably worth about 5,000 gold. Baron, you can make Baron worth 5,000 gold, and it's gold that you're able to spend the way that you want to, but ultimately a lot of that power goes away from the Baron buff, whereas the power from Dragon Soul persists throughout the rest of the game. And when you are depending on Jinx to be the one doing most of your damage in these late game fights, and to like carry the game for you because Danny is probably their most important player, it's a lot easier to play when you're not getting perpetually slowed by Hextech Soul. But again, that's kind of whatever. Then in the fourth game, the draft really not as bad, but I don't know why they're prioritizing Tryndamere very highly. So they gave away the fourth dragon, which is one of the decisive points in the game. But it was also bad that they kept dying to Caps and losing these very close trades because it seemed like they were losing focus, thinking to themselves, oh, we can let somebody else finish off that kill. I'm just going to walk away. And then Caps ended up turning it around and outplaying the situation, which is definitely something that you are always kind of vulnerable to because Caps is a very good player. And then later on in the game, they lost a dragon in a 5v4 fight. So they were standing around mid lane. They get a kill on somebody. I think it was the support. And then they still lost the fight because they weren't decisive enough to engage. They kind of ended up getting flanked by Gnar. Broken Blade had another good ultimate. And then Ezreal came in and kind of helped clean everything up. So again, let's go back to the things that are going bad in general for Evil Geniuses. So first of all, I think that Danny and Vulcan have been playing very poorly, just in general. Their laning phase hasn't been great. Vulcan's been dying a lot, and I'm not saying that to be like, oh, Vulcan's a horrible player. It's very tough to be one of the main engage options for your team in a game that's very close or in a losing scenario, and Vulcan's bad score lines are often a result of that. So then you have to ask yourself, why is EG in these bad positions to begin with? It's because of the drafting. So if it's a lot of it has to do with the drafting. So if you're a coach and you're putting your players into like questionable situations, the player is either going to have to outplay the draft diff, or they're going to have to change the way that they're able to play the game, which is very limiting. Just in general. So I'm going to split this into things that the coaches can help with or can contribute to success with before the game, so pre-game and in the game. So and these are mostly criticisms, honestly. So when you're a coach and your team is slow to figure out the meta continuously, that's a coaching problem. Evil Geniuses started very slow in the beginning of the season. They've been bad at drafting consistently. The drafting that they had during playoffs was probably a big contributing factor to that. Was probably that the meta was so determined and the other teams were kind of convinced of what they were good at, and it made drafting a lot more predictable. I'm not a professional coach. I am not a professional analyst. I made videos before those series started that kind of mapped out what I would expect like Team Liquid to do, what I would expect 100 Thieves to do, and how Evil Geniuses could kind of do something about it. And I was right. And if I'm able to do it, their coaching staff is able to do it. Could I do that against somebody like Dylan Falco? Maybe not. Maybe not. So, they're slow to figure out the meta. They're bad at drafting in general. And they're bad in a wide open meta. So I think that as time goes on, even at MSI, it's possible that, G2 playing against T1, G2 playing against RNG. Maybe their strategies become a little bit easier to kind of anticipate when they think it's a very important game. So during the Rumble stage, we need to see, is Evil Geniuses able to draft better? Will they figure out this meta? Will the meta be more determined? That's just a question that we have in general that won't be answered until the games are played. But then in game, what are the things that we can kind of improve on? Danny and Vulcan can play better. Simply, they can just play better. And we know that they're able to play better. A lot of these trades that they're taking in the game are questionable. And then you can kind of ask, are the drafts good enough to have the players be the deciding difference? Like, are they starting at a deficit worse than 50-50? Or is it really up to them to overcome some kind of deficit that was caused by drafting? Second, I just don't disagree. I just don't agree with EG's dragon priority. And that's another criticism I've had for a decent amount of time. I always prefer, it's like, if my team is ahead, take the dragon. Period. There's no like thinking required. Drag's coming up in a minute. Set up for dragon. Take the dragon. Other team contests. Since we're ahead, we should probably win. If we're losing, maybe give it away. But eventually, when you know that dragons are coming up in a minute, that's really your opportunity to establish vision, try to get a pick, and then if the pick doesn't work, try to trade the objective. And then last, and this was mentioned a couple times during the broadcast, is like, I think Mark Z said, it's almost impossible for Evil Geniuses to know that they're winning the game from a gold perspective, even though they're losing based on the kills that were occurring in the game. It's not impossible. It's not anything. I don't even, and maybe he didn't say it was impossible, but he said it was unlikely that they knew, or if you ask them, they probably wouldn't be able to give you the correct answer. I think that he's right that they wouldn't be able to give the correct answer, but again, that's a limitation of coaching. Every single professional player, this is your livelihood. This is what you do for a living. This is something that you should be able to do quickly. How do you do this? You click tab, you look at your items, you compare them to your lane opponent. Are my items worth more than my opponent's items? If the answer is yes, you communicate that to the rest of your team. Every single player should do that for their corresponding member. That gives you the first level where it's like, yes, we have more items than them. And it's very important to do this throughout a game, because you will realize, like, I'm at a one item breakpoint, they're not, I'm a half item ahead, I'm a full item ahead. And then this, people don't want to talk about this or listen to me about this. My items are more gold efficient than theirs. We are going to scale better. Things like that. These are all things that can help inform your decision making throughout the game. But they should also be talked about before the game starts. This should be informing which champions you're selecting, and it all is kind of like a vicious. It all feeds into itself. If you know which items are the best and that's informing your drafting decisions, it's going to be easier to play out your draft because there was intentionality behind your draft. So those are the main things. And has this gone the way that I wanted it to? No, definitely not. But I think everybody victory lapping G2 being better than EG, be careful, because there's still the entire Rumble stage to be played, and then eventually there's going to be 4 teams left. I still think that EG and G2 will both make it into that semifinal, the quarterfinals. Quarterfinals? No, semifinals. So if we get, T1 against EG and G2 against RNG, would you be shocked if the finals was G2, or would you be shocked if the finals was T1, RNG, and then G2 and EG both, lost in the semifinals? Obviously, all the people that were G2 supporters are going to say, oh, G2 slapped EG in the group stage. It's all that really matters. But I think that the real question is going to be, how does EG take this opportunity to grow from the group stage, get a better hold on the meta, and then draft better in their future games against better competition? And this is where you can start to focus on the experience of things, not only for the players, but the coaches. We sucked in the group stage. Do we have the resilience to get slapped around and then learn? Brush yourself off and learn. This isn't like a time to be defeated. It's like, okay, we sucked and we're still in the next round. So now that we're in the next round, how do we get better? We get better by coaching better, playing better, making better decisions, understanding the game better, learning from the enemy, being in this environment, learning from teams like T1, RNG, and G2. Like G2 is good enough that it's a good thing for EG to experience. Like when EG is playing against 100 Thieves, C9 for the most part, Team Liquid, or if they were playing up against another top tier LEC team, these are all the teams that you can actually learn things from and force you to improve. So like the gaining experience thing can't be your priority, but now that you're getting slapped around, you need to stay true to your process, and that experience of staying true to your process while collecting experience for your players, that's really how EG is going to be able to take the failure of the group stage and turn it into something. So I know there are a lot of people that were super excited to kind of message me and joke about, oh, G2 is so much better than EG. Like, how could you possibly have thought that EG was better than G2? All I have to say to that is let's watch the rest of the tournament. Let's see what happens in summer, and then come talk to me at Worlds. It's still possible that G2 completely misses Worlds. It's still possible that EG completely misses Worlds. So, I'm not going to feel horrible, especially about the talent evaluation stuff, unless G2 ends up, being insane for the summer split, going to Worlds, being better at Worlds than I expect them to be. And I really don't, it kind of sucks that, it had to turn into me thinking that EG is a good team. Everybody thinks that I hate G2 now and that I should be, ashamed for thinking that EG was and is better than G2 from a talent perspective. I still do think that. And that's the kind of thing that's going to play itself out over months and years, not 4 games at MSI. So I know a lot of you are probably waiting for this video. That's kind of my opinion on how things have gone so far. How does EG move on from here? It really depends on their read on the meta, and maybe they can't fix that during MSI, and they're going to leave MSI pretty defeated in that scenario. But hopefully, this doesn't happen again in the future. But that's going to require some fundamental things about the team to change from a preparation standpoint. But that's it. That's enough. That's enough negativity for now. I hope EG turns it around. Thanks everybody for watching. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching again, and I'll talk to you later.